West. Well, yeah, just generally talk. There's there.
Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Today, my very special guest is the Texas representative for the 10th District, which is Ellis County, Brian Harrison. How you doing, sir?
Hey, my friend, I'm doing wonderful. It's a beautiful Friday here in Ellis County. And I'll tell you what, any day that I don't have to be in Austin is a great day. So it's always good to be with you, my friend.
Yeah, good having you. Always good
Yeah,
having you on the show. So I wanted to have you on specifically for education because there's a
great.
lot out there. I'm going to start off. I'm going to start off with a video that I saw just to start it off. So
Perfect.
this video is what you had up, and I'm going to go ahead and play it.
Okay. Agreeing to me. So going back to 2011, which your slide does, you are
Is it coming
saying
through?
that Texas 8th graders scoring at or above basic on the NAEP have gone down 20 percentage points from 2011. Juxtapose that to what TEA showed us yesterday in their annual report, that since the exact same year, since 2011, per pupil, so not total, per pupil, education spending since 2011 has gone up 42%. Am I reading the TEA data correctly?
Yes, in raw dollars.
Am I right? In nominal, I don't know if these are nominal or inflation adjusted. I don't know, but either way, it's going to be that's a staggeringly high increase, right? Nominal or real. And I'm reading your chart correctly, right? Is it correct then when you put the two together to say that when per pupil funding was 42% lower, math outcomes were 20% higher?
Yes, for fourth grade NAEP scores. I will add the caveat that there is a lot of things that did take place between 2011 to today. So that is certainly an element of...
You could discuss the variables, but it is objectively true, pulling official TEA data, your NAEP data that you've presented in here, to say that when per pupil spending was 42% lower, math scores were 20% higher.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw that video and I was like, oh my. I watched a little bit of that particular that hearing and some of the things that were brought up by the educator. I don't know what is his
Yeah, and that guy, just so you know, so this was people should know if they're not aware, I am honored to serve on the Public Education Committee for the Texas House of Representatives. So all K-12 policy runs through the committee that I serve on. And that individual was actually not the TEA commissioner. That was an individual who's with a education-focused think tank here in Texas. Earlier in the day, or it may have been the day prior, I can't recall, was the TEA commissioner. And he and I had a lengthy discussion where he confirmed to me, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a second, that we have never spent more on public education in Texas than we're doing right now. So I was pulling from testimony and some questions that I was having with the TEA commissioner earlier in that hearing, where he said this public education spending has never been higher. In fact, since 2011, it's up 42%. And then this individual and his organization came in and brought data showing that since 2011, math scores have plummeted by 20%. So I was bringing together two different testimonies that we had heard in that hearing.
They just did the budget, CISDs in Ellis County. Midlothian, MISD, and WISD in particular. WISD had a $4 million shortfall, and they used fund balance to cover it. And then MISD had a $6 million shortfall, and they want to do a VADER in November, voter approved tax. And it's an election, basically.
Yeah.
So they want to do an election for that VADER.
And just so folks know, when you hear a VADER, what that is, I think the two last letters you were looking for were tax rate election. So what this is, because people's property taxes, and I'm sure you hear this talking to folks in Ellis County, are out of control. And I have people in my office calling me, emailing me. They show up in tears. They don't know how they're going to afford their property taxes. They don't know if they can stay in their house. They don't know if their grandparents are going to be able to stay in their house. And so what the state has done, and I actually think we need to go more bold and more aggressive on this, but to fight property taxes, the state has put a little bit of limitations, although not enough, on how much the political subdivisions like the cities, counties, and schools can raise taxes without having to go and ask the voters, hey, are you okay with us raising taxes so high? And so when you hear a VADER, what you're hearing is that a political subdivision of Texas, so city, county, schools, are setting a tax rate that is so high that the state of Texas is requiring them to hold an election to make sure the voters are actually okay with them raising the taxes so much. So that's
So
what.
the discussion, and thank you for clarifying that. The discussions when I was watching the budget meetings were there were ADA, there was because school funding is very convoluted. It's very,
Unfortunately,
there's a lot of stuff going
yeah,
on there. So
it's very complicated.
one of the things that they brought up is that the state of Texas is taking away money or not giving more money. And one of the big ones that has been said is since 2019, there hasn't been a per pupil increase in Texas. So
Yeah.
talk to me about
Yeah.
what's going on in Austin and what's
Yeah.
going on locally. How do you see this?
So one thing I should have said at the very beginning, because I want to be very clear on what the goals are, because unless you have a strategy, unless you have a vision,
I was
then
gonna ask you.
tactics are, it's just motion without direction, right? We've got to be really clear with people in Ellis County, people in Texas, with what are we trying to accomplish? And let me tell you what I'm trying to accomplish. I care so much about education in this state. I've got 4 young kids. I'm personally vested in education. I want Texas public schools to be the #1 public schools in all of America. I want our test scores to be the highest in the country because I believe every child deserves a quality education. And then the other piece of that I care a lot about is making sure that the people who care the most about these kids, the parents, are the ones who are in charge. And we'll talk about that in a little bit, I'm sure, about how we're trying to put the parents in charge of their kids' education. But I want the best schools in all of the country. So that's the objective. All right. And when you're talking about the public education finance system, no sane person would devise a public education system, funding system like we have today. This is because of court cases, and there's a long history that would take many hours to unpack, but it's very complicated. Here's the problem. What is happening? Some people are well-intentioned and just misinformed, and other people, unfortunately, very liberal, extremist, taxpayer-funded lobbying organization like the Texas Association of School Board, Texas Association of School Administrators, et cetera, they are absolutely knowingly lying to teachers and parents across the state. And they're pulling this one statistic and they're saying the basic allotment, that's just one piece of the funding. So if you have total funding, the basic allotment is one piece, but there's a lot of other pieces that go into the total of how much we're spending for every single child. So the basic allotment, while that hasn't changed, all the other funding has. So anytime you hear somebody saying they haven't given us more money since 2019, know that you are being lied to, or you are hearing from somebody who has been misled and they don't understand what they're saying. And that's why this chart, and I hope my office got you a copy. If not, it's hard to see, but this is what I held up to the TEA commissioner. And in the public hearing, when he was there to testify before the state, I asked the question, has this number, it's this line right here, it's hard to see on the screen. This is the line for the last year the data is available, okay? And that number has never been higher in the history of the state of Texas. I'm going to say this again. Per pupil funding, the amount schools are getting per student, because some people say we had a bunch of students come into the state. Okay, true. So let's take a look at revenue or spending per pupil. It has never been higher than it has in the last official TEA report. And I asked the commissioner when he came to testify, and we can send you the video, and he said, absolutely, that is absolutely a fact. We have never spent more per child. So when you are hearing that the state of Texas has defunded public education or underfunded public education, that is a myth. It's an outright lie. And in fact, public schools in Texas have never had more money than they have right now. So when you hear this 2019 number, and in fact, let me show you. I'm going to try this. It probably will be very hard. If you see this bar graph, it's not in color, but there's different sources of funding. The basic allotment would only be right about where my finger is, okay?
Mhm.
So when they talk about 2019, the basic allotment hasn't gone up, they're only talking about the amount of money under my finger. But what they're not telling you is all the growth above my finger. So they're getting a ton more money than the basic allotment, which, yes, hasn't changed since 2019, but so many of the other factors have. And I'll give you one statistic. Just in the last legislative session, just last year, the state of Texas appropriated approximately $7 billion with a B, new dollars to public schools across the state of Texas. So public education is absolutely fully funded in the state of Texas.
So last year they gave money because that's one of the things that there's a surplus in Texas, and you greedy people are hoarding money over there.
Yeah.
Brian hates educate, and what I'm saying right now, people, is the things that these are the comments that have been on his page. Brian hates education. He hates public education, etc. There's a lot of hyperbole going on there. So I wanted to have him on.
I call them lies. You can call them hyperbole. I call them lies.
It gets I try to stay.
Yeah.
So the one thing that's being talked about too is school choice. And before I go
Before
on
we get to that though, real quick, so I do want to go with this whole notion because it's the big government liberals that are trying to stop what you're about to get to. They will do anything to keep parents from being able to control where their kids go to school. That's the reality. And if I hated public education, which is just absurd, I want our public education system to be the best in the country. I'm trying to do everything in my power to improve our public education system. It is only big government liberals who only have one solution to everything. And that's just more money. Just throw more money at the problem, as opposed to saying, you know what, we've got to be responsible because Texans are being taxed out of their homes. How good of a job are you doing with the money? And let me tell you something. The lack of funding is not the problem. I just showed you they've never had more money than they do right now. 2 points. More money is not the solution. Let me prove it to you. This just came out of Michigan. We'll get you a color version of this chart, okay? You see the skyrocketing numbers right here? That is an increase in funding, spending in government education in Michigan. And yes, it's adjusted for inflation. This is how much in Michigan, this is new data, spending on public education has gone up. Do you see these numbers down here that are flat and then down, dropping? These are test scores. These are student performance. These are education outcome. So even though they're spending astronomical amounts and it's increasing, test scores are plummeting. So it is an objectively true fact. A lack of funding is not the problem. And it's also true that just throwing more funding at a system without demanding change is not the solution. And here's the other thing. The public schools do not want parents to know. They're terrified of what I'm about to show you, okay? Where are they spending the money? Because when people are being taxed really high, right? The biggest chunk of your taxes are your school taxes. And by the way, I want to get rid of those, and I want to get rid of property taxes altogether and solve this problem once for all, but that's a topic for another day. The schools do not want the parents to ask the question, what are you doing with all the tax dollars we're spending? What are you doing with it? Let me show you what they're doing to it. Okay, this is a chart showing the growth, and this is nationwide, but this is true here in Texas as well. All of this growth right here, this is administrative bloat, educrats, highly paid superintendents. We've got superintendents in Texas making over $600,000 a year. All right. We've got the administrative bloat off the charts. We've got principals and assistant principals exploding. And look right here, almost a flat number of students. And get this, almost a flat number of dollars going to the teachers. The current public education system in Texas is not prioritizing teachers. And they don't want you to know that. They want to get the teachers all worked up saying that we are defunding education, when the reality is people like me, I filed the most pro-teacher amendment in the history of Texas that would have forced schools to spend at least half their budgets on paying our great public school teachers. It was the big government liberals that barely succeeded in killing that bill. It was the teacher unions, the same teacher unions that are spouting this lie that we haven't increased funding since 2019. It's all misleading. And I want people to know, I want our schools to be the best. I want our teachers well compensated. I want our test scores up, and I want parents to be in charge of their kids' education. But we can't just blindly throw more money at the problem. That's what big government Democrats.
There's a big, on the next session, and last session wasn't able to be passed, and that's school choice.
Yeah.
And it is a big topic in your district. There is a lot of chatter about school choice robbing money from public education, being funded by the big lobbyists, that it's just going to give rich people a stipend so that they could send their rich kids to rich schools. There's a lot of and these are folks, these are comments that are made online that I'm like regurgitating right now.
I know, but trust me, I know fully you are far too smart to be saying things like that. I know you're just reading what somebody else wrote.
I am regurgitating those. It's funded by big guys, and they just want money. People, they just want money. For me, I come from
it's
always been in rough neighborhoods, and I came from the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And
you have a very inspiring story. I want to be very clear about that.
Thank you. In Brooklyn, I would have, when I was a kid, I would have loved to have had school choice. I had one school and I was going to that school or I was going to get in trouble. There was many experiences like that where I would have liked school choice. Now, the talk is that it'll go to rich people, it'll go this. Here's a question one of your constituents asked, what does a school choice bill look like?
Yeah.
What
So
like
let me hit a couple of those things you mentioned because they're super important. And I got to start off with the first. You probably saw, I can't even help but laugh when I hear this whole notion. And by the way, I need to say this too. It's not that there's a lot of chatter about this. It's a tiny number of people who are trying to be very loud about it and make it seem like there's more opposition. I am working, and I know this for a fact. I'm working for what my constituents in House District 10, look, my neighbors and friends in Ellis County. I campaigned on school. This is what they want. They voted for me. I won by a massive margin, even though I was outspent by the liberal teacher unions. My opponent opposed school choice. He outspent me 3-1. I embraced the issue of education freedom. I promised to do everything I could to put parents in charge of their kids' education. And even though I was outspent 3-1 by a big government liberal who opposed school choice, I was elected with double digits. And let me tell you something else. Every time this has been on the ballot here, and the Republican Party ballot anyway, in Ellis County, we're a Republican dominated district, school choice, the voters who go to the polls, they support parents, teachers. Okay. When they go to the polls, they have supported school choice by over 75% every time it's been put on the ballots. The overwhelming number, this is just a fact, and I just want to repeat this. The overwhelming majority of Ellis County, the overwhelming majority of Texans of all stripes, partisan affiliation, urban, rural, wealthy, working class, they want their parents to be in charge of where to send their kids to school. So I want to be just really clear about that. On the point that you said, this is one of my favorite myths because it's just so absurd. And if you think about it for 2 seconds, I think you'll laugh too, that what you just said, oh, school choice is it's a program for the rich. Newsflash to anybody watching. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The rich already have school choice. It's part of being rich. Hey, let me tell you what, if you're a rich family and you've got a kid in the school and that child is being bullied or that child is being harassed or that child cannot read or isn't being taught how to do math, you know what a rich family does? They put them in private school the next week. They up and move to a more expensive neighborhood that has a higher quality public school. Because here's the reality, the rich don't need school choice because the rich already have school choice. The people who will benefit the most from parental empowerment and parental school choice are the economically disadvantaged, working class, single mothers. What are you supposed to say? What do these people, the critics of school choice, say to a single mother, let's say in a bad ISD like Austin ISD? Okay, she wants nothing more for her beautiful, precious little child than have a great life. And we know that one of the biggest variables in determining whether somebody has a chance at a great job and a great life and a great career is to have an education where they're taught to read and to do math. The opponents of public schools want to say to that mother, life sucks. We're going to trap your child in that school where they have less than 1 in 5 chance of learning how to do math and reading on grade level. And I am saying no. I want to stand up for every parent because I want every child to have a quality education, whether that's in private school, public schools, charters, or homeschools. So I hope public school passes, I hope school choice passes. I'm going to do everything I can because nothing is more important than doing everything we can to make sure every child gets a quality education. And the people who need to be the ones making the decisions need to be the parents. The taxes that people pay, they're to educate these beautiful students. They're not to prop up a system. And let me give you a statistic, DV, that's going to shock you and shock your viewers, and you will not hear this from any of the liberal opponents of school choice that are very loud on social media. Do you know how many 8th graders in Texas are proficient in mathematics? I'm just going to ask you, do you know? I don't expect you to know.
I don't.
Okay. 23%.
Wow.
Do you know how many 8th graders in Texas are proficient in reading? I'm not going to make the answer. It's 24. DV, those were some of the first statistics I learned when I was appointed to be on the Public Education Committee for the state of Texas. And as a father of 4 young kids, DV, I'm going to tell you, it made me angry, but it also broke my heart. If kids can't read by the time and do math by the time they're in 8th grade, their statistical likelihood of getting caught up is tiny.
No. Yep.
And we have got to stop turning a blind eye to these kids and shoveling billions and billions of more dollars so we can have superintendents making $600,000 a year and build $500 million football stadiums while we're not getting the money to the classroom. And that's the dirty little secret. The public schools, they want to talk about the state of Texas sitting on a fund balance. We are. And my proposal is to give every penny of that fund balance back to the parents and the taxpayers across the state of Texas. But let me tell you what the schools also aren't going to tell you. They're sitting on, this came out at my last hearing, the schools themselves are sitting on approximately $20 billion that they are not spending on teachers. The current public school system is not prioritizing the teachers. It's not empowering the parents. And unfortunately, less than 1 in 4 students, 8th graders, can read and do math proficiently. We've got to demand changes.
I'm running out of time, but I wanted to ask you, no, and I love the passion, and I wanted to have you on because I see what stuff is online, and I wanted you to talk to the people.
It's better for your blood pressure if you just ignore that stuff. Let me tell you,
yes. What does a school choice bill look like to you?
Yeah.
And what do you say to parents that are concerned that if you pass a school choice bill, you're going to take money away from public education?
So let's go with the last first. I would have to ask anybody who says that, the first question you should just look right in the eye and ask them, why would it take a single penny from public education? Ask them sincerely and see what answer you get, because they don't want to answer the question. Because the only reason that any money would ever leave public education would be why? Because a parent might put a child somewhere else. Okay, then why would a parent put a child somewhere else? Is a parent going to put a child in an educational environment that's worse for that student? I don't think so. I don't know any parents that would do that. The only reason they would do that is if the educational needs of their student were not being served. And then here's the question that they really don't want to talk about. Who should be the one that gets to decide? Should it be the government that is right now failing over 3 out of 4 Texas students? Or should it be the parents that love that child and want the best for that child? And here's the thing. This is why I'm so excited about school choice. And if you go back and watch all of the hearing, and it's painful, but it's long, it's two full days, but we've learned that not only does school choice improve education outcomes, it's good for teachers. It can absolutely increase teacher salary, something, by the way, I'm working overtime, harder than maybe just about anybody else to do here in Texas. All right. For our good teachers, we got to make sure they get paid more. School choice will do that because it lets them compete in a broader marketplace, just the way doctors and lawyers would. I want them being compensated, our good teachers, as well as doctors and lawyers. All right. This gets lost in the shuffle. Good for teachers. It empowers parents. It increases education outcomes for students. But let me tell you what else it does. It improves public schools, because right now what we have is a system where competition is missing in the equation. Every other part of our economy where competition is allowed to work, we see 2 things over time. We see quality go up and we see costs go down. Right now, we've got the exact opposite in education. We've never spent more, and our quality is 20% lower than where it was in 2011. So I'm so excited about school choice. I'm going to do everything I can to pass it, not just because I believe it's true. And by the way, I believed it was true since I first started studying economics as a young economics student at Texas A&M a very long time ago, but also because it's the mandate. It's what the voters who elected me to my job are demanding. They are begging for the chance to be the ultimate person that decides where their beautiful child goes to school. And let me tell you something else. Most of those parents are going to choose their local public schools, because in most cases, that public school is probably going to be the best choice for those parents. But let's let competition work. Let's let it incentivize the public schools to improve, because if they don't want the parents taking their kid out of that school, maybe instead of building these $1 million, $500 million stadiums and paying their superintendents more than the governor of the state of Texas, maybe they should hire a few math tutors, hire a few more English tutors, focus on the things that matter. And that's what I'm working for. I want Texas public schools to be the best in America.
There are concerns from homeschool parents that this might affect them, that some of the regulation creep from that they get some funding and all of a sudden, because every time the government gives you money, there's strings. And they're concerned with this, or at least there's some that have voiced a concern with that. Can you address that and we'll close out?
I would love to, because listen, I'm one of these people that when people come to me and say, hey, Representative, do you think government should do? And I'm like, let me stop you right there. The answer is probably no. Whatever you were about to ask, government probably shouldn't do that thing.
Right.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing in Texas. The alternative to to school choice is not libertarian, utopian free markets in education. That's just not the reality. Absent school choice, we have a one-size-fits-all government-run monopoly. When did Republicans, conservatives, people who believe in freedom, when did or Democrats who believe in freedom, okay, or independents, when excellence is demanded, do we say, you know what we need? A one size fits all government run monopoly? You would laugh. We never say that. So the alternative to school choice is a government monopoly system that's failing over 3/4 of our kids. As to the concerns for private school families and homeschool families, I can relate to this. I'm very concerned about the growth of government. Anybody who knows me knows I'm trying to make government as small as I possibly can. Here's the reality. The argument about government strings coming with government money, that primarily relates to the federal government because the Constitution really limits the federal government. So the way the feds get around this with the Department of Education is they come in and bribe the state, hey, take our money, and then all these dangerous strings. So two things on that. One, I actually want the state of Texas to stop taking federal money. We can educate Texas students with Texas communities and Texas teachers and Texas families. But number two, if the legislature wanted to enact some really bad regulation on homeschools and private schools, the state of Texas doesn't have those constraints, so we don't have to have the money. We don't have to have the strings in the first place. The state of Texas could outlaw homeschooling tomorrow. We wouldn't need a school choice program to do that. The state of Texas could require 3 hours a day of liberal gender studies and CRT and SEL. And if you're a homeschool family, you don't do that, you go to jail. We could do that today. Now, I would die on the hill of stopping that. But so while I understand and am sympathetic to the concerns of government growth, it's not appropriate in this setting and on this topic. And let me tell you something else. If you care about private school and homeschool, you should be the biggest supporters of school choice because we do not stop the liberal indoctrination that is absolutely happening in America and sadly in Texas too, where the trends of education rates plummeting. Well, it's not plummeting. Liberal indoctrination. If we go on this for another generation, my friend, I'm afraid there won't be a single freedom or liberty that's not up on that chopping block. We have got to protect private school, homeschool, charter schools, public schools, liberties, freedoms. And the best way to do that is with maximizing and making sure the education, making sure every child in the state of Texas receives a quality education. And the key to that is putting parents in charge of their kids' education. That's the most important thing. And you asked a second ago how it would work. It would be so amazing and so easy. Parents would get what's called an ESA, an education savings account. And they simply just tell the comptroller, hey, this is the school that I want the tuition going to. And they send it right over there. Or I'm in a homeschool and these are the things that you're allowed to buy for educational purposes. Or you know what? I'm happy in my public school. Keep making sure the money goes there. It would be the easiest thing. And here's the last thing I want to leave you with. I want Texas to lead on everything that involves freedom and liberty. I want Texas leading the nation in the defense of those things. If we were to pass school choice next session, which I believe we're going to do, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure we do, and I will never waver on that, we would not exactly be blazing any bold trails. I wish we had led. Over 33 states in America have already empowered their parents with some form of education freedom, and in not one of those states are any of the lies and the myths and the scare tactics and the horror stories that you're seeing on Twitter and on Facebook. In none of those states are that fear mongering has it come to fruition. We haven't. Friday night lights didn't exist. Football teams didn't disappear. Public education didn't go away, and in fact, it got better. Teacher salaries went up. Test scores went up. Parents were empowered. It's a win-win. And if we do it right, it actually will be a win for taxpayers because one of the other things they like to lie about is, it'll cost too much money. If we properly design a truly universal ESA program where every parent could get the amount of money to send where they want for their kids to go to school, since that amount of money is actually less than the total per pupil fund, at a certain point, the state would start saving money. And the one PhD economist that used to work in the Trump White House calculated that if we gave every parent an ESA in the state of Texas, we could save over $20 billion of education money. Know what we would do with that $20 billion? Put it right back in the pockets of everybody who's watching this podcast, right? So this is good for teachers. It's good for students. It's good for public schools, and it's good for taxpayers.
You were fired up on this one, Brian.
I care. I want our kids to be educated. They have to be. It breaks my heart, DV, that there's so many students are not receiving a proper education. And I will never be cowed by people who are only interested. Here's the reality. Only interested in propping up a failed system by throwing billions of dollars more at it. We would be doing the next generation a disservice if we didn't have the courage to open our eyes and realize the problem realize the solution and then throw everything we have at working towards the goals. It can be done. And that's what I'm going to spend every day in the state legislature doing until we get this done.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking
Yeah.
about education, Brian. I really appreciate you. Can you stick around just a second after the show? I know you're late.
Absolutely.
All right.
And